Sherlock Holmes, the man who never arrived. A short story by Benjamin Dawn. Chapter 1. A Man on the Platform. It was one of those English mornings that are neither unpleasant nor remarkable, and for that very reason so easily forgotten. A thin haze lingered over the small provincial station, and the air carried the familiar scent of damp stone, coal smoke, and the subdued impatience of waiting travellers. I was journeying alone that day. Holmes had withdrawn into one of those periods of what he himself termed necessary inactivity, and I was bound for the coast, a place whose name I had known only in passing, and whose significance would not become clear to me until much later. As I stood upon the platform, my attention was drawn to a man who differed in no obvious way from the others, and perhaps for that very reason stood out. He was of middle age, neatly dressed, without any striking feature. His coat was clean but not new. His hat sat properly, without vanity. Everything about him suggested habit, a life that rarely required explanation. He noticed my glance and offered a polite nod, that unspoken acknowledgement common among Englishmen who have already taken each other's measure. A brief exchange followed, beginning with the unreliability of timetables and drifting, as such conversations do, to the weather, that safe ground upon which strangers may meet without truly approaching one another. He mentioned his destination, a small coastal town, and spoke of an appointment he intended to keep there. There was nothing unusual in this, yet I recalled that he pronounced the name with particular care, as though it mattered to him that it be understood correctly. The train arrived, steam and noise cutting our conversation short. We boarded separate carriages and parted with that casual courtesy which carries no expectation of meeting again. At the time, I would have sworn that the man was simply en route, and nothing more. That this very fact would later pose a problem was something I could not yet have imagined. Chapter 2. An Irregularity Without a Name. Several days passed during which I attached no significance whatsoever to the encounter on the platform. It was only when Holmes, one evening, casually selected a file from the pile beside his chair that the man returned to my thoughts. "Tell me, Watson," he began, without lifting his eyes from the papers, "how much weight do you assign to the memory of a single witness?" I set my newspaper aside. "That depends upon the witness and upon the memory." "Precisely," he murmured. "And what, then, if that memory can neither be disproved nor confirmed?" He handed me a letter. It was written by a local official from a small coastal town. The tone was polite, almost apologetic, yet the content was distinctly unsettling. A request for clarification regarding a matter that did not officially exist. A man was said to be missing, despite never having been recorded as arriving. No inn had lodged him. No vessel had taken him aboard. No railway official could swear that he had left the train. And yet there were several individuals who insisted they had seen him, indeed had spoken with him. I read the letter a second time. An uneasy sensation stirred within me, not because the case was dramatic, but because it lacked all clear outline. No crime had been reported, no accusation made, only a request, almost an embarrassment. "It must surely be some mistake," I said at last. Such matters usually resolve themselves. Holmes' lips curved into that narrow smile I knew so well. "Usually, my dear Watson, but not always." He set the file aside and looked at me directly. "The man," he continued, "has not vanished. He is untraceable. There is a considerable difference." I said nothing. In my mind arose an image, a misty platform, a courteous nod, a carefully pronounced place name. For the moment, I kept this to myself. Chapter 3. A town with a polite memory. The coastal town received us with the restrained plainness common to many English communities that live by the sea without ever truly embracing it. A line of grey houses stretched along the shore road, their facades smoothed by wind, their windows watchful yet uninviting. Gulls circled overhead, but even their cries sounded weary, as though expectation had long since abandoned them. Holmes moved through the town as if he had entered it long before our arrival. He observed without questioning, and listened without appearing to engage. I, on the other hand, felt from the outset that quiet unease which arises when politeness becomes a barrier. Our first stop was the inn near the harbour. The landlady, a woman of sober courtesy, listened attentively to our inquiries before shaking her head. "A gentleman of that name?" "No, sir. I cannot recall one." Then, after a brief pause, "Well, it is possible that someone matching your description stayed here, but there is no entry." Similar replies met us at the harbour office, the railway station, the post office. Everywhere the same pattern: hesitation, polite cooperation, a memory without substance. No one contradicted us. No one confirmed us. "It is curious," I remarked at last, as we walked along the narrow road leading toward the sea. "They all seem to remember, and yet nothing in particular." "On the contrary," Holmes replied calmly, "they remember very precisely, just not what would bind them." He paused before a notice board where old timetables and announcements were pinned. Some were faded, others half torn away, none entirely removed. "The people here," he continued, "are not forgetful. They are cautious. Memory entails obligation. Uncertainty does not." A chill ran through me. I thought of the man on the platform, of his care, of his name, which I still remembered clearly. And suddenly this place seemed less a refuge than a space between things. A place where one might be seen without ever having been. Chapter 4. The Order of Gaps. Holmes spent the greater part of the following morning, not as I had expected, in conversation with the townspeople, but among papers. Timetables were spread out, guest books examined page by page, harbour lists compared, notes taken and discarded. It was one of those phases of his work that must appear tedious to the uninitiated. No dramatic revelations, no sudden conclusions, only patient attention. I sat opposite him, watching as his fingers traced columns and figures as though feeling for an unseen structure. "You see, Watson," he said at last without looking up, "this is not a case of forgery." "That would have surprised me," I replied. "There is no sign of deliberate deception." He raised his head. "Oh, the intent is there, just not where one usually looks for it." He indicated a guest register. Several pages were neatly kept, names entered carefully, dates correct. And yet, between two entries, there lay a gap of nearly a full day. "No one here has lied," Holmes continued. "They have merely assumed that someone else would feel responsible." The same pattern emerged in the railway records. The train had arrived. The carriages were accounted for. No discrepancy existed. Yet the disembarkation of individual passengers was not recorded. Habit was relied upon. "Order," Holmes said quietly, "functions only where men believe it must function." I began to grasp his meaning. The man had not fallen through a hole in the world. Rather, he had moved in such a way that no system was compelled to retain him. "You mean," I ventured slowly, "he used the rules without breaking them?" Holmes nodded. "Precisely. He walked through the interstices, where responsibility evaporates." I recalled the care with which he had pronounced the name of his destination, his composed manner. That care now seemed less accidental, almost methodical. "And yet," I objected, "someone must have seen him, must remember." Holmes' gaze rested on me for a moment. "And that, Watson, is the final anchor. Memory, without proof, strong enough to disturb, too weak to compel action." Chapter 5. The Intention to Disappear. It was later that afternoon when Holmes suddenly paused. For hours he had spoken little, comparing figures, marking locations, aligning time frames. Now he set his pencil aside, as though an internal calculation had reached its end. "Watson," he said calmly, "the man is not a victim of this condition. He is its architect." I looked at him. "You mean he planned all of this?" "With considerable foresight," Holmes replied. "Not through cleverness, not through deception, but through an exact understanding of human habits." He began to outline his conclusions. The man had deliberately chosen routes where oversight was considered unnecessary. Small stations, unchecked transitions, lodgings that relied upon trust rather than regulation. Everywhere that order is quietly assumed rather than enforced. "He did not make himself invisible," Holmes continued. "He made himself irrelevant." The word struck me more forcefully than I had anticipated. "A man who acts in such a manner," I said softly, "must be desperate." Holmes shook his head. Not desperate, determined. Desperation is loud. This is quiet. I said nothing. Within me stirred the resistance of a physician who seeks the human being behind the pattern. But Holmes went on, relentlessly factual. He wished neither to be pursued nor to be dead. He wished simply to be untraceable by authorities and by expectations alike. And has he succeeded? I asked. Holmes looked at me. His gaze was penetrating, almost assessing. Until the moment, Watson, that you remembered. My breath caught. I knew then that my silence could not continue. Chapter 6. The Encounter. I led Holmes to a narrow path above the coast, which I'd noticed the previous day. It was unremarkable, little more than a worn track through grass and gorse, leading to a low bench overlooking the sea. It was not a place one sought. It was found only by those who did not quite know what they were looking for. The man was seated there, as though he had expected us. He wore the same coat as on the platform. The same hat lay beside him. Nothing about him suggested tension or surprise. He did not even rise fully, but merely inclined his head, calm and courteous. "Dr. Watson," he said, "I wondered whether you would remember." Holmes halted, his hands loosely clasped behind his back. He said nothing. This was no moment for deduction. "You have not fled," I observed. The man smiled faintly. "No, flight leaves traces." He spoke quietly, without bitterness. He told of a life that had slowly narrowed. Obligations, expectations, roles that one no longer sets aside. No crime, no scandal. Only the gradual disappearance of one's own voice. "I did not wish to begin again," he said. "I wished to cease being found." Holmes stepped closer at last. "You knew," he said, "that you would be sought." "I knew," the man replied, "that one is only sought for as long as it remains convenient." There was no defiance in his words, only a sober recognition. "And Watson?" Holmes asked at last. I felt the man's gaze upon me. "I did not plan for you to remember," he said softly, "but I hoped." I found no answer to give him. Chapter 7. What is recorded? We parted from the man without a handshake, without a promise. He seated himself once more upon the bench, gazing out to sea as though nothing further remained to be said. Holmes and I walked back along the narrow path in silence. Only when we were beyond earshot did Holmes speak. "He will remain," he said. It was not a question. "Yes," I replied. "And no one will seek him." Holmes nodded. Later that evening, he seated himself at the small table in our inn and began to write. No reports, no accusations. He arranged, he removed. He introduced clarity where uncertainty was permissible, and left gaps where none would cause alarm. By the following morning, the matter was concluded. The man was neither missing nor traceable. He had never officially existed. As we departed, the landlady addressed me once more. "Did you succeed, sir?" she asked pleasantly. I hesitated. "We found what could be found," I said at last. She smiled, satisfied, and turned to other guests. Epilogue. Memory without proof. Even now, I recall the conversation upon the platform, the tone of his voice, the care with which he pronounced the name of his destination. There is no record to confirm it, and no proof to deny it. Holmes remarked once when I spoke of it, "The most dangerous gaps, Watson, are not those in the records, but those we willingly accept." I've often reflected upon this since, for I now know that a man may be seen without ever having been. Sherlock Holmes, the man who never arrived. A short story by Benjamin Dawn.